It's been a few years since I finished building this railway, or maybe I should say it's been a few years since I've gotten to the state it is now at the moment. And definitely it is not finished, so I have still a lot of things to do. But I thought it's time to give an update on, how it is doing and how it is holding up against the elements. Of course, I get a lot of questions on, whether the gluing of the ballast works and what is my experience with the rails. So I'm hoping to cover all this in this video. If you didn't know, I have a playlist on my channel which is called The Garden Railway is Born, and that playlist contains all the videos that are related to building the layout and everything on this layout. So if you haven't seen that, or if you missed some of the videos, I put the link to the playlist into the video description. I am going to freehand the rest of the video, so it could be a little bit shaky. First, let me have a few words about the foundation, because I think that would be the easiest to cover, because that pretty much works as I designed it to be. And it is a very sturdy, base and framework, basically just, all concrete and concrete blocks. And pretty much I expected it just doesn't move anywhere. So there are no issues with the track, and I don't have to do any maintenance on the track itself. I'm not talking about conductivity, but the alignment of the tracks, the leveling and that sort of stuff. So everything stays in put pretty much as I did it 4 years ago. And actually, let me talk about the timeline. So the foundation was done in 2013, and the track work actually started in 2014, and well, it was started and completed in 2014. So the track's been around for a little bit more than 4 years now, because this is July 2008. And I've done the next major addition 2 years after the track was finished, so that was in 2016 when I did the station area, most of the ballasting, and that's pretty much it. So the station and the ballasting been around for 2 years, so they have survived 2 winters, and I have to regret that I haven't really done anything last year or either anything pretty much this year. Probably the only thing we needed a little bit of attention is the viaduct, which I think I've repainted last year, and it was mostly cosmetic, so there's nothing wrong with the structure. The white paint was just getting a little bit dark, and probably you can see some rundown of dirt patches on the side, because of course there is nothing on the top, so it gathers dirt. But there is not much I can do about it. So it just needs a fresh coat of paint every couple of years. I have these few small patches where the render is coming off, so it's showing the bare concrete underneath. But that's pretty much it. I can live with that. I probably need to paint this over, and then it's going to be fine. The steel bridge is doing its second year or second summer out, and I can see some smaller patches of rust, which is due to my improper painting and the fact that it's just mild steel, but I think it looks fine. I mean, this is how it would look like in real life as well, so it adds more character, and it just weathers naturally. And let's talk about the track now. I have no regrets going for this Pico Gauge 1 track, even though it has a really limited selection. Basically there is only, I think it's a number 6 or thereabouts, turnout or switch and the flexi-tech, and that's basically, there is nothing else in the lineup. But I was able to put this station, I mean, it's not really a complicated layout, but I never needed anything more than these sets of points and the flexi-track. And even with the flexi-track I can do some really, reasonably straight tracks. Probably the only issue I have is on the other side of the layout, where I have some kinking due to, well, probably thermal expansion. The thing is that I learned is that you can spend enough time to make sure that you have good conducting rails. And I'm saying this because I have feeder wires, so these ones, at both ends of the station. And that's pretty much it. So basically the rest of the track, which is another probably a good 30 meters, is not powered. And it was actually pretty fine in the first year and probably in the second year, but I could see that the conductivity of the track is slowly deteriorating, and that's probably due to the fish plates getting more and more corroded. So in the back straight, which is just behind the trees there, I can see that the trains are going noticeably slower than in the station area. It's still not too bad. So what I've started doing, and actually that's pretty much completed all over the track, is I started installing jumper wires over the fish plates. In some sections I actually solder the fish plates over, which I should not do, because then the fish plates can't absorb the contraction and the expansion of the track. In many places I use these single core wires, which I think is probably it was a bad decision, because that pretty much acts like a really solid joint. So I don't think this really allows the track to expand and contract. So it's just like I could have soldered the fish plates and it would have been the same thing. So I've done this in a few places, and after that I just switched over to regular multi-core wires. So they have some bending, and as you can see, the installation is probably not really designed to the outdoor use, so it might just crumble and fall off, but I don't think it's going to be a big issue as long as these solder joints hold, which they seem to do after a couple of years, so that seems to be fine. In case you didn't know, we are in Hungary, so we get some really hot summers. So in the summertime the temperature can go up to like 35 degrees, and in the winter we get some really cold weather. So I don't know, maybe the -20 is the coldest one, even though we are in the city, in the suburbs, but I think -10 is quite common. That's all in centigrade, of course. So as you would expect, track cleaning is absolutely mandatory, especially for me, because sometimes I don't play for a month. The railheads get quite dirty after some time, and the engines just wouldn't run, or they just stop every 5 meters. So I just have a piece of wood with a sandpaper wrapped around it, so I just go over to the layout and then just clean the track just like that. And of course it's quite easy for me, because the track is pretty much like waist high. Well, not waist height, but at least I don't have to bend over for all the 47 meters or so to clean the track. So it's like probably like a 50-minute job, and then we should be ready to run the trains. The other thing I noticed this year is that I have some conductivity issues in the points. So usually my engines will stop at the points, and I couldn't really figure out what was wrong. What I think the problem was that I was not getting continuous power in these rails, because these rails get power by having a contact to the stock rail, the the point rail contacting the stock rail, and based on how good the spring is in the point, that contact is probably not reliable, and also these fish plates here probably get corroded. So the engine would come all the way here past the frog, and it will stop somewhere here. So what I did is I also added these wires here, which was actually quite difficult to solder, especially in these places where I had the ballast in. So I bridged these two rails and also these two rails, and that seemed to have solve the issue. So I think if I get new points in the future, I would probably do it in the beginning, just to make sure that the trains can run reliably over the points after a couple of years. I also suspected that the microswitch, which is sitting under here, would give in after a couple of years, because that is switching the polarity of the frog, but that seems to be holding up quite nicely. So the trains are not stopping on the frog, so I think I still have good power in the frog itself. Fortunately, I don't have any issues with the electrical systems either. So this big cabinet is really nice. I mean, it's been working quite nicely and reliably, and I quite like this design where this cover basically goes over this lip, so it seals off the electronics quite nicely. And of course they live here all year round, so that's probably all the electronics, the booster and everything being in there for well, at least 3 years, or probably 4 years, I think. And so they have survived the summers and the winters, and they get direct sunlight, and they also get water sprayed on from the irrigation system, and they seem to be working just fine. And these are just, you know, off-the-shelf Chinese electronics and power supplies, and the stock Märklin products, which I think they are mostly designed for indoors. So that's nice. That's working quite nicely. The issue I have is more like with this cabinet, which is still nice, but the only problem is that so the door has these two retaining clips, or the spring-loaded locks, and they go clip onto these lips, and then one of the lip has broken off. I tried to, you know, glue it back on, but it's basically hopeless. It's a piece of plastic, so it's not going to stay. So it's only held down by this clip on the top. And well, probably for that reason, and maybe for because of some other reasons as well, these screws here, which hold the lid on, well, the front cover on, started to corrode. So I needed to do some servicing inside this box, and I was able to unscrew this one, but I wasn't able to unscrew the other one. So I have no idea what I'm going to do with it. You know, so far so good, but I will need to do something about this in the future. It still works, everything works, but again, you can see some water here, and that's probably the fact that the irrigation was running last night, and I have a sprinkler that way, so I think that's probably spraying water like sort of like this direction, and it gets in here. But again, there is a seal under that, and that basically prevents the water from getting in, but still, you know, it corrodes the screws, so it's not ideal, but it hasn't caused any electrical issues so far. Okay, so let's talk about the ballast and gluing the ballast down. So just to show again, this is the product that I used. Of course, all the text is in Hungarian, but as far as I can see, they are using the exact same labeling in other countries as well, just the text is in different languages. So it says Patex Palma wood, waterproof, and it has these three icons, the umbrella, and this other one which says dry transparent, and the third one which says D3, which I have no idea what that means. And it's interesting because if you look at Patex's website, then in the product description it says indoor, but when you look at the features it says indoor and outdoor. And when I read the label here, it doesn't actually say whether it's only indoor or indoor and outdoor. But oops, as you can see, it works. So I have these, you know, glued down, and they are definitely not going anywhere. So these ballasts act like you know, one huge blob of basically rocks. And I'm not saying it's perfect, because I do have to, or at least I should do some touch up on the ballast every year, but I think in 90% it just works. And keep in mind that this is like a huge concrete slab. So in the winter, the snow falls on here, and then it melts, and it forms an ice, like an ice layer, and it definitely gets into every cracks and everywhere. But it still, you know, the ballast still manages to hold to the concrete. So I have no major issues with this ballast. But let me show you the things, or the areas where I have smaller issues. I've come to the other side of the station, and that's where I can see most of the deterioration for again some reason. So there's supposed to be ballast all the way through the, you know, the right side of the track, just like here. So this one is solid, and then, you know, pretty much the entire right side of the ballast is gone. And you can see that there are some, you know, smaller patches which are still glued together, and also I can see some stuff here. So, you know, ballast is missing here, again some bigger patches there. And because all of this is concentrated in this area, I can just only think about that maybe there was some issues where how I apply the glue. Maybe I used too much water, or I just haven't used enough glue in total, because sort of that's the area which has all the issues. Again, if I look further, this seems to be nice and solid, and if I look at the other side of the platform, that's absolutely solid, and, you know, everything is held together perfectly. So I still say that this method works, and this PVA glue, diluted PVA glue method, is actually something that you should consider. And again, keep in mind that this is exposed to the elements, so things are going to happen. It's, you know, frost and summer heat and birds and everything, so you need to do some sort of maintenance every year. Well, or you don't do it like I do and still have, I think, a reasonable layout with some, you know, minor cosmetic issues. If you remember my previous videos, you might have noticed that there is much less shade on the station area, and this is something that I did deliberately, because there, in sort of here, there is a big green gage tree, which we don't usually enjoy. I mean, the fruit of the green gage ends up being a mess, and it just creates, like, you know, rotten fruit on the floor. So I've cut down most of that tree, and also I think we pruned this plum tree as well, which is nice because the station area is more open, and it's a little bit of an issue in the summer because it just gets too hot, and the station area used to be a nice shade where I can park the trains if I'm not running them, and not, you know, worry about overheating too much. I mean, I don't think it's really a worry, but well, if I have shade, I just park my trains in the shade. The only other thing is that these plum tree usually gets pests, and these pests create this I really don't know how it's called in English, but it's like a mucky substance that falls below, and then it contaminates the rails. Not that it really contaminates, it just creates this greasy residue on pretty much everything, the platform, the rails, and the concrete itself. So it's just nasty, and it washes off after a couple of rains, but it just stays there for a couple of years. So you can see the this part of the platform is a little bit more dirty. And the last one is the platform. So this platform is 2 years old now, and it's not really in a great shape. So the paint started to peel off, and that just happened this winter, I guess. And it's sort of okay on both ends, and it looks a little bit worse in the middle, probably because that gets exposed to the elements the most. I don't think it's a major issue. I just probably need to scrape it off and then, you know, have another coat of paint, and I probably is going to hold that for another 2 years, something like that. The other issue I have is ants decided to move in, and they have started to carve, you know, probably pieces of this foam out. So I think they are living under the foam. Well, not at the moment, because I sprayed some pesticide, and as you can see, it's no longer held down to the concrete anymore. So that's where the ants have gone in. So I need to plug that hole with something. And also, as you can see, there is one guy there. As you can see, this whole thing is just flapping around in the breeze. So I need to do something about that. And as you can see, this that layer on the foam board is also peeling off in a few places. For example here, which is not a good sight. And it looks like that wherever I had the ballast, which probably gives another layer of protection, especially in the, you know, where the foam board meets the concrete. Sorry, I was not pointing the camera. So in the corners where the foam board meets the concrete, if I have the ballast here, that's probably, you know, give some extra layer of protection against I don't know, maybe frost and some ants as well. So I should probably make it a priority that I continue the ballast at least along the platform, just to have it protected a little bit more. And finally, let's talk about the structures. As you remember, I have this new stand here because I have all the wiring harness coming up just inside of it, and it is not looking, you know, particularly good. I think this is 2 years old now, and if you remember in my initial video, these are supposed to be newspapers, so I've put like miniature newspapers printed on them and sealed them with clear lacquer. But that doesn't seem to be, you know, that doesn't seem to help a lot, because most of the covers have peeled off, and basically I'm just left with the white plastic art, which is all these newspapers are made of, and also the figure is missing some layers of paint. So anything that I painted on myself and also sealed with transparent lacquer seem to be gone now. So I think my fixing technique is probably needs some refinement. And if I remove the building, this is, I think it's also because of ants, so that must be I don't know, some sort of dirt or just basically chewed up pieces of the styrofoam, which is not exactly surprising because the wire inlets here, so there are some holes in there which I haven't plugged, which I probably need to do this year. And unfortunately most of the platform lights have stopped working as well, even though they were not in the elements for the entire winter. So I removed them sometime in autumn, and I've basically plugged up these with these plugs, so there's not supposed to be any, well, there is an 8 inside, an 8 shell, so there's definitely a wildlife inside. So I plugged all these holes in, so they should be protected in the winter, but still. So it's either the sockets which are corroded and they are not conducting anymore, or the LEDs, the soldering, something. I don't know, I haven't figured out it yet, but that was not a foolproof solution. And maybe finally the storage depot, which was completed about 2 months ago, so it's been sitting outside since I made the initial video, and well, it doesn't show any signs of age yet. I have some spider webs here, and then most of these things are just basically dirt which spray on, when the water hits the concrete, and then basically the dirt just sprays back on the building. But other than that, it's holding up really nice, and it looks as new, just like it looked a couple of months ago. That would be my layout update. Hopefully I've answered all the questions that you may have. If you have any further questions, just post them in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, and hopefully see you in the next video.